Hello, welcome to the Squarebase Show with your hosts, Rob and Val. And today we are going to be taking a deep dive into Cathay.
Okay.
This is my Buddha pose.
Cathay, you say?
Yeah.
I was trying to, in the spirit of the article, which does a lot to try and very blatantly talk about lack of cultural appropriation and sensitivity. I was very focused on that dance.
I didn't see the dance, and I won't even look at it in the edit, to save both of us the feelings. Hello, Squarebase fans. Hope you're all very, very well. Val, you're really well, especially because in October, if you're based around the Canada region, you're going to be able to attend one of your new events that's lined up, right?
Oh, soft launch. Whoa, out of nowhere. Yeah, October 17 and 18 here in glorious Toronto, Ontario, Canada. Was not expecting to announce this, but I have put down $2,500 smackaroos.
Whoa.
On the venue, guys. That's only half of it because it's a big mother-sucking venue. We're right back where we were before. The Artist Playground, which is during the Monday through Friday, a like aerial acrobatics, like a Cirque du Soleil like training ground. It's a cool spot. So yeah, October, I believe 17, 18, keep your eyes peeled. Tickets will come up. It's going to be an Old World event shooting for about 100 players because we sold 70 tickets last year. Let's grow it. And then I'm looking for an AOS TO, and there will be, in fact, Blood Bowl being played there. Probably the biggest Blood Bowl event in Tirana's history in some time.
What about your favorite game, Titanicus? Is that available?
I'm trying. So I'm going for the fantasy theme here. So I'm open to Middle Earth strategy, whatever game. I'm open to
that's what it's called. Mordheim.
Conquest.
Yeah.
Conquest. Last Rite of King. Mordheim. Sure. Whatever. We got room to party, guys. Let's go. Let's get all the fantasy IPs out there.
Let's get it all together.
Song of Ice and Fire before Simon goes out of business or sells all of their furniture.
Well, I'm excited about that. I'm looking forward to the event. Now, right now, there's a question mark of whether or not I'm coming. It is my birthday. So Val very generously has said, come along, Rob, if you want to, which is great. I may. The idea of maybe kind of cross pollinating. I could visit all the AOS people in Canada, visit all the Old World people in Canada all at the same time. Could be a cool thing to do for shoresies, but also I like the concept that you maybe are pushing to becoming. I'm going to describe you as the Adepticon of the North. That's what I'm going to start. I think that's a great place to take it. Vendors, get some people selling some cool stuff, get some paints on the go. I think there's room for it.
Holler at me, guys. SquarebasePodcast@gmail.com.
But don't hack us, please.
How's that going to hack us? How are they going to hack us?
That's a general question. I say that a lot, actually, in most of my videos. Please don't hack me. That's what I say.
Okay. # no hacking. Also, very quickly, Squarebase Online Tournament 360, the SBot 360. We are at 100 friggin' players.
Wow.
You can still enroll until the end of this weekend. Games start on June 16th. So if you get your enrollment in before June 16th, I'll let you play. That's the last you'll hear about it. Robbo.
Yeah, so today's video, very exciting. There's so much stuff about to happen in Squarebase land, and the frequency and the frequency of our videos, the frequency of our videos is going to start to increase. So do subscribe, leave a comment. Nearly at 20,000. That's super cool. But today's video we're going to be talking. Today's video we're going to go back to our roots. We're going to go back to our roots because there's an almanac. Right, there's an almanac article, and before all of the hot gossip that came out for the Old World emerged, reading through these was our bread and butter. So this is very exciting. Looking forward to this, especially because I saw someone in a alternative WhatsApp group the other day, and not an Old World one, say that they think that this is the best article. Actually, question for the audience and you. They said it was the best article that they had seen come out of Warcom for several years, which I agree with. I read a lot of the Warcom articles.
Was that me who said that to you? Because I feel like I said that. Oh, okay.
But if you said it, then two people.
Well, there you go. Yes, it's shockingly candid.
Yeah, but before we get into
shockingly candid.
Before we get into it, I want to ask you and the audience, the response to the Cathay stuff, as we have said, ever since we've even been talking about the rumors, has been, in my opinion, astronomical. We even saw, and before we get into this, there's an amazing YouTube video that you can go and watch by a wonderful lady. Oh, I'm going to forget who it is, so I'm going to just remind myself of it right now.
We're gonna kerplunk the heck out of it.
Yeah, it's Lorica Clothing. 150,000 views on that video, where she discussed like the cultural influences of the Cathay armor and how it related to actual real-world historical references. Because we are playing a Warhammer fantasy battle game. It's a kind of medieval battle game. But my point is, the response online has been crazy. I think this might be the biggest release Games Workshop have done since maybe 9th edition 40K. I'm saying it. And my question to you is, will you be getting it? Question to people watching it, are you getting it? And third question, do you think people are going to be able to get it?
So this is where, like, Rob always flexes so hard on me as a content creator, because those are big statements, Robbo, and I'm Canadian. I don't know that I can commit to those kind of statements, but I will say this is certainly, I mean, on the fantasy side of things, definitely, I think the biggest release they've had in a very, very, very long time. I think this is certainly probably a bigger deal. I'll put it this way. I think this might be a bigger deal than the original release of Old World. How about that?
Yeah,
I'll put it there.
Wow, I mean, that was huge. That was a sellout release.
Because and the reason I'm saying that is that right now we know, thanks to the Squarebase Online survey, that 25% of the players, which, by the way, I think is a crazy high stat considering how this was marketed, 25% of the players are new. So, like, they didn't play previous versions of Warhammer Fantasy Battles. And so there's already people willing to be like, okay, I'll figure out how to pin a metal model so that I can play this game. And now we've got sexy sculpts. And now we've got a new, intriguing army and basically like an unlock to an entire part of the map. And lore and history and all that kind of stuff. So it is a massive deal. And yeah, I think yeah, this could be an instant sellout when it does drop.
Yeah, I really think that this will be the explosion. We talked about this a lot. Anyway, we'll get in the info now, but let me know in the comments. Hit me up with your thoughts, what your local community is feeling. Rob, I'm based in, I don't know, Norway as an example. I'm based in Norway, and everyone in my local club's talking about it. Everyone's jumping on it. This will be my buy-in. I'm super interested. The chat is generally... Also, outside of the old world, there's going to be a lot of scalping for other game systems. There's people buying this to use in Age of Sigmar. There's people buying this to use in other, fantasy-based games. I think there's going to be... Go on.
Well, I maintain that I think this price point, so I think this is not going to be priced at a premium versus the other sets. I feel like Cathay will be released at the same buy-in as the old models and everything else that we've seen. I might be wrong, but I genuinely think that's going to be the case. So yeah, if you want a much cheaper way to, for example, create a Cities of Sigmar army, I think you just found one. So yeah, I think yeah, it's just going to be Imperial Guard, like Imperial Guard in 40K. Like, think how cool the stuff you can do there. Yeah, it's just a really awesome canvas that echoes through history to the people who decided to kill Warhammer Fantasy and says to them, "What do you mean there's not enough narrative space to tell stories and do cool stuff in Warhammer Fantasy?" There was just a whole planet they weren't using. So yeah, it's, as we will discover, it took a plucky little video game studio to be like, what about this half of the planet? Can we do that?
Then
GW scrambles to do their homework from 30 years ago.
The entire global south just mad right now. Right, okay. The entire global south. All right.
Okay, so there's a southern hemisphere. Look, we're getting into the east, okay? One day maybe there's a southern hemisphere. Maybe. Let's not get too crazy here.
I'm really surprised I haven't seen you pull off the British accent with a, well, governor, do you reckon some of them not from round ears would want to play some Warhammer? Like
I like the idea that
I met a fella last night who was getting a takeaway, and he was like, "I wouldn't mind playing."
Oh, what? You are born here? I like the idea that British people refer to foreigners as some not from round ears.
Oh, Games Workshop. All right, so if you've never done an article read with us before, we take this in turns. And then we kind of talk about it. So, believe it or not, Grand Cathay has been present in the background for the Old World almost as long as Warhammer Fantasy has been around. Great and mysterious empire far to the east of the World's Edge Mountains. There have been references to Grand Cathay in margins of rulebooks and bestiaries, role-playing games and army books, from an ill-started treasure fleet to a scheming diplomat in the leagues of Hanxi. And we're going to get a lot of names wrong, so I apologize. Through hushed references to an immortal dragon.
Someone gave us a pronunciation guide, which we will go back to and read before we do actual reviews of this, so that we're not completely ignorant, because we're going to make fun of Games Workshop for its implied ignorance throughout this article. I know I will. I'm not going to speak for Rob.
I am,
but he will as well. And while ourselves being ignorant, so that's a key thing. You want to recognize your personal hypocrisy whenever possible.
I try. So throughout hush references, Immortal Dragon Emperor, and more, we've only witnessed Grand Cathay scatter glimpses. That will change soon with the first J Warriors, J Lancers, Grand Cannons disembark, and the Marienburg from War Junks dispatch the aid. The Empire is growing struggle against chaos. My first point, actually, if I don't mind bringing it up, is obviously this is launched from the same studio, SDS, that launched the Horus Heresy, not the book series, but obviously the game system, which itself was just a throwaway line in Rogue Trader, right?
Something like that, yeah.
So I think it's.
I see what you mean. Yes.
Yeah.
This Warhammer was, sketched by Rick Priestley and others, I guess 40 some odd years ago, and yeah, they created a lot of sort of very open-ended sentences and things that could be narrative or setting hooks. And one of them I think they're referring to here is that I think in one of the original editions of Warhammer, where their first attempt at world building just started with a map, which was of course a map of the world, like our world, but a little more drawn from memory. And on it, I think Cathay was there. I think that's what they're referring to. That it's been there since basically the beginning. I think the first time they actually create a proper setting, I think is either second or third edition, probably third edition.
Yeah. And what I think is cool is that if this does go really well, which I expect it to go very, very well, there might be small single lines or throwaway edge bits of writing in other older works that we've all forgotten, little inklings in our eye, which will be brought forth and maybe turned into something as huge and as impressive as this, or the Horus Heresy as an example. So, very cool.
Yeah, like throwaway lines like Skaven and Ogre Kingdoms. I wonder what those are about. Maybe they'll expand on those things.
Okay, do you want to take us through the next bit under the picture?
Oh, sick! This is a new almanac innovation we share. All right, to celebrate the upcoming arrival, we sounded the war gongs and gathered the original team who worked on Grand Cathay for a wide-ranging interview on how the faction took shape. Over the next few weeks, Old World Almanac will be touching on everything from sculpting to gameplay, but we're starting at the very beginning, in 2018, when a video game studio approached Warhammer.
This is quite funny as well, because I would almost guarantee the SDS studio were like, you have to interview the designers. And they're like, we don't do that. And it's like, well, that's what we do. Like, that's how we're doing this. Like, do you want some information from us? Then you have to interview the designers. That's the only format we're doing it in. Because this has not been something we've seen done for any of the other game systems or anything else that's happening.
It's really cool.
Yeah.
I think in general, we're always, I believe your people would say, taking the piss out of old G-dubs and even our friends at SDS within GDubs. And this is a really great article in the sense that they name people kind of, and they share the story of their creative process. And you'll note JTY has been there down in the boiler room, thinking about Warhammer Fantasy since at least 2018, which is pretty cool. So yeah. I really enjoy this article.
So Owen, who's the background developer, archivist of obscure references. So Owen's actually the lead for the Old World. So like the.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, GTY is the rules guy, but there is like a lead, obviously, because they talk to the sculptors, background writers, a bunch of other stuff. To artists, they have a big art department in SES. So it all started in 2018 when the Creative Assembly, the video game studio behind the epic Total Warhammer trilogy, approached Games Workshop because they wanted to add more factions to the third title in the Total War series. They asked about Kislev first, which already had a fair amount of units described and even designed, but a few of us got together and have fun concepting new units. They came back to us in 2019 and asked if they could tackle Grand Cathay with something so embedded in the background, the old world, and yet so mysterious. We told them we'd need to design the whole thing ourselves to ensure that it was accurate to saying. A little bit that's left out of here, some Rob knowledge from inside the company, is when Creative Assembly came back for Total War Warhammer 3. Games Workshop said no. Yeah. Now, this is a story I've heard very directly from like a first-hand source, said no, which is why Creative Assembly pivoted and went and made, hilariously, 3 Kingdoms. Or like, something along those lines. Yeah, so I think this timeline is a lie. And I think it was whatever it was. They did 3 Kingdoms. That did really well in China. Games Workshop obsessed with being big in China. It's a population of 1.4 billion people, a burgeoning middle class. And
India's I think bigger than them now. So maybe we'll see whatever Warhammer India is soon.
Oh, that'll be elephants. Let's go. I'm in. But anyway, that's just a little bit of side note from the back that I thought was fun. When they came back, then Games Workshop were like, we need to design everything. And then Total War were like, cool, thanks for doing our work for us.
that's my favorite part of this. Is just like, we'd love to develop, we're a very competent group. We've done all this stuff. And Jada was like, no, we are going to do all of the work. And that's all right by me. This also, so the timelines on it, I agree. The timelines are a little sus here. Yeah. But one thing I really wanted to tease out of here is that I wonder how much Warhammer 3, like Total War Warhammer 3, and the act of fleshing out both Kislev and Cathay factored into them being like, well, you know what? We could just make a game for the tabletop that ties into all of this. We made this 8th edition book for Cathay, and we could just do this for all of it. And like, don't we just have a bunch of old models kicking around? Like, we could. Didn't we have a tabletop game for this incredibly popular real-time strategy / 4S strategy game? We could do this, guys.
And then someone screeching from the back, it didn't sell. There's no more creative room.
It's too small. It's one planet. It's only one planet. You couldn't make a game out of the entire history of human civilization.
Okay, so next bit's yours, and we find out Mark. We can talk to Mark.
Old Mark, concept artist and Warhammer Institution. Who's Mark? Warhammer Institution. That is quite the byline.
Maybe Mark Bedford.
Wow.
Really famous if you
yeah. So here again, Sus. We actually started before we knew that Warhammer the Old World was coming back as a game. But we treated the whole project as you would any other new army, starting the work almost from scratch.
Okay.
I'll just roll on to JTY, lead writer and sardonic FAQ answerer. So all the shit we gave for the last FAQ probably didn't win us any points with JTY, if that is the case. It was a small team to begin with. Mark started doing the concepts while Owen was put onto the background at the same time. long before anyone was thinking about rules. The first job was to search through all the Warhammer material for references to Cathay, everything that had been written going back to the second edition of Warhammer Fantasy Battles. There have been scattered references to Grand Cathay throughout the history of the game, but there has been a rich crop of references across the various editions of Warhammer Fantasy roleplay over the years. Very cool.
Yeah.
Some of these older ideas have been left in the past, but there are plenty of nuggets we reused when Owen first dug out. To give a sense of how well buried some such nuggets are, he famously exclaimed out loud in the studio one day, "Which idiot wrote this?" before he noticed the byline and realized it was him. Oh,
that's good. That's good. Yeah, you ever gone to, like, I never use Facebook anymore, but you know how you can do the memories thing and see what you did in the past? And
yes.
It's just like a journey through idiocy. You're like,
oh, it's great.
It's like 1 year ago you said this, 4 years ago you said this, 10 years ago you're like, oh, I hate myself. That's gross.
Also, just love to refer to the quaintness of the fact that there was a byline, and they could identify that they actually, in fact, wrote it themselves. That is an adorable, wonderful historical nugget there.
Yeah. Interesting also what stuff got left in the past. Maybe that's a reference to the fact that, some of the early writing was a little bit out there and maybe a little unbassed. To put it politely.
This article is a demonstration of certainly the intention of being bassed. So that's why I give it a lot of props.
There's also a fascinating kind of point about mass media. Soft power is the delivery of like cultural awareness through things like movies, books, music, art, cuisine. Thailand pay people to go to other countries and set up Thai restaurants, as an example, to expand the concept of Thailand. And it's interesting that 20, 30, whenever some of this stuff may have been written, the kind of landscape of what China was, and very much the conversation around what China currently is becoming, a huge high-speed rail, these mega cities, some of which are abandoned. There's like a lot of like online discourse, but 20, 30 years ago, there definitely would have been the concept that I think it's fair to say, the concept that it was a much poorer, more kind of working third world style nation with manufacturing growing, and there was some famous books. You've worked in the economy sphere for a long time, Val. I'm sure there's been big conversations like China's a place to be, or it's a growing space. There's a lot of that, and now we're in 2025. The role of that is very different, right? That's quite interesting.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when Grand Cathay would have been first referenced, in Warhammer Second Edition, which would have put you in the mid to late 80s. There would have been a much greater, feeling of Orientalism, if you will, like this sort of, China in general, even then would have not evoked thoughts of a weird autocratic tech dystopia or whatever it is that you associate with modern China. It would have been probably closer to how we envision North Korea, like modern China in those days. I think a place that was, a very much outside of, the Western world. And, I remember growing up, whenever there was, footage from China, it was people riding bicycles, there wasn't, China very much has come up as far as economic growth and development of industry as a, world power and trade, and all that kind of stuff has happened really in the last 30 years in great significance. So the lens that you would view, China and culture through in the 80s as a GW writer is going to be very different than you would today. And then, of course, without pussyfooting around it at all, there's, especially with modern China, there's obviously going to be sensitivity, and they talk about this, taboos, both politically and culturally, that you want to avoid if you want to set this off on the right foot. It'll be curious to see how that actually works in practice, like when we're actually reading the lore and we're seeing how they treat these characters and stuff. Whether or not they still feel like Warhammer, because again, a lot of the tropes of Warhammer is a very gray sort of viewing of human nature and the various actors alive on this planet. So I'll be curious to see if they're as grimy as, say, the Empire is, or if they maybe have a different tone.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. Like, and apologies that both of us gone on something there, but like deep diving into the past as they've done, like, as you know, brings up that referential change, and also is really interesting when you start to approach, or if they do approach, some of those other places around the world, or like other fantasy armies, and also the popularity of these things. For example, maybe Space Marines have never really caught on in China because, like, as in the buying population, because that's not really something that they can really like identify it with, and maybe this will become much more popular. Anyway, there's some really fascinating stuff in, and I wonder if they think about that, which we'll talk about, I guess.
Yeah, and I think to your point, though, that's not even just a representation question. Like, I mean, Space Marines are faceless super soldiers. It might just be as symbolic. Like, it might be just like how the symbolism of certain things in Warhammer 40K or Space Marine specifically hits that culture. It might not resonate the same way as it does with us, and that's why I think having different factions and different entry points is a really great way to grow potential interest in a game, because there are all kinds of different ways that these factions and these sort of lores and mythologies can resonate with people and pull in different folks from different areas and spaces. And it's not just about visual representation. It's also just about how does that story or that vibe resonate or not resonate.
I'm really excited about my cat girl J-pop army for Old World. That's going to be fun. Anyway, so Owen said, I'm quite proud of the fact that there's absolutely nothing in Grand Cathay that contradicts anything that came before. We managed to work in all the timeline entries and tidbits, for example, the Lisbon books, the Oak Kingdom books, even all the way back to the second edition. And that's nice. That's really cool. And there were more than a few apparent contradictions where the Dragon Emperor has been given different names because scholars don't have full information, or because travelers arriving at the edge of the Warpstone Desert have met a functionary and assumed that they were the Emperor. In the Lizardmen book from 5th edition, there's a story about a sailor from a Cathayan city and an ill-fated treasure fleet that comes to Lostria, which, like a lot of Grand Cathay, is still based in real history.
Chinese treasure fleets, early 1400s, some of the most badass shit you'll ever read about. It's wild. It puts it puts European exploration in that time, and also European naval ability in that time, to shame. It's wild. If you don't know about the treasure fleets, go read about the treasure fleets.
That's so cool. That's so cool. Everything from his city of origin to the tattoo on his back and the things he talks about has all been worked into the background, of course. Much just remains unpublished. We prepared a lot of material for our own background, only part of which is being used for this project. That's cool. I guess this is kind of like an Andor situation. I think what's fun about Andor, and no spoilers, I won't spoil it for anybody, but one of the fun things is the Rogue One movie, the Andor the series, which is obviously a prequel, they were able to create a lot of the things that are in the movie that were throwaway items, like someone's blaster or something, become far more important because they create this story before it happens. This is a little bit more challenging, right? Like integrating that story and making sure not to contradict anything, pretty hard. But I guess they can always hand wave it away with like, they were wrong.
Yeah, or the faulty the unreliable narrator is a great Warhammer trope where the actual perspective of the person telling the story to you in the world matters in Warhammer, and that's something they use, I think, as a clever way to get around inconsistency, but also as a neat way to build the world. Like if you're getting the perspective of the history from a Empire scholar, you might take it from with a bigger grain of salt than something that's being told from the perspective of a Cathayan scholar. And how cool will it be when we start to get the impression of the old world from the Cathayan perspective?
Yeah,
like that's going to be neat. Like how does this people view the old world and how the empire is run, or weirdo Bretonians, or like all the weird monsters that they've got on that side of the planet. Like it's very neat. Now there's an opportunity for like culture clash, and anyway, all kinds of cool shit that way.
And some great Black Library books. Black Library, if you're listening.
Yes, Black Library. I assume they're scrambling some sort of content from Black Library. It seems like it. Anyway, it's fine.
Anyway,
at the very least, Cubicle 7 will like so
which announced.
Yeah, it's announced. It's imminent release. Maybe Rob and I will play a role playing game for the first time in our lives. We'll see.
But only if we're both Cockney British lads.
Oh, no problem, mate. I'm sure that'll be very. I'm sure the there's like a few checklist items on how to make a popular role play podcast, and aggressive Cockney accent has got to be first.
Do you want to say what GTY said?
Old JTY, before this project began in 2019, they're really hammering that it started in 2019. There had been a lot of useful references, but it wasn't consistent and it wasn't kept in one place. There is now, but there wasn't a big folder marked Grand Cathay.
Okay. Owen, the most extensive thing written about Grand Cathay was in Tamrakhan, the Throne of Chaos from 2011. Let's go, Alan Bly. There was a Great Onyx, Croman, Shungungan Wizards, and the Warpstone Desert, all of which will be familiar to fans of Total War. Okay. So Tamrakhan, still, even to this day, providing.
This is actually something I would love. Those of you out there who are big lore heads, I've actually been wondering this. What are all of the previous references to Grand Cathay? Because obviously there's lots of stuff in the wikis and stuff. Maybe I can go just look at the bibliographies in the fandom wikis. Tamarkan, never too far away from Robbo's heart.
Always one hand move away. Let me continue to read.
And beautiful book, great big beautiful book, and
please don't.
So I was trying to appeal to the comments. What are the sources for this, and especially folks who know Wolfrip, Warhammer fantasy role playing game, because I suspect that's actually where most of the detail of Cathay written so far comes from. Is probably in the RP.
Say that specifically in what way?
Well, I just mean like, so Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay has like a tremendous amount of source books. I think they're in there. I think Cubicle 7 is 4th edition, but each edition I think has expanded like a lot of detailed lore and world building and setting. Apparently you need that for a role-playing game. I don't know. So I suspect the majority of what has been written for Cathay is actually from Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, as that is the case for a lot of Warhammer Fantasy lore and background, is that it actually is really grounded in the role-playing game.
Yeah, that would make a lot of sense, because they like Total War. I mean, ultimately, Old World has hugely benefited from Cubicle 7, but also from the Total War fleshing out, because there was an active, constant designer studio. It's super worth talking. No, it's not worth talking about. Games Workshop invest actually very little financially in development, like very little financially. Sure, they might spend some money on tooling, but actually the wages and the labor power put into development does not rival things like a AAA game similar. I guess it's not a AAA game, but like something like Total War or any of the modern game studios, and the sheer volume of work that's put in.
We're talking about like what they actually invest in writers and creatives.
Yeah, like literally nothing.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair to say.
Like you're talking like, I know there's sculptors and there's some other elements, but like I'm sure the Total War team actually significantly dwarfs the GW team, and then has been active on this project for 10 years. So they'll ask questions which, people on their lunch breaks when they're writing the 8th edition books didn't have time to answer. So there's a real momentum behind this as an ecosystem, ignoring all of the Warhammer Fantasy Battle universe pre 8th edition and before. Post then Cubicle 7 and that studio, there's probably cumulatively between Cubicle 7 and Creative Assembly more design and development has been done in these 10 years leading up to Old World release than was done in the previous 30 years in labor time.
And certainly, and I would just to say, as I suspect, as we joked earlier in the show, I would suspect that actually that's a good thing, because I think it's probably shown Games Workshop what an IP they have here. You know what I mean? What's ironic is the demise of the old of Warhammer Fantasy in 8th edition. A lot of it was grounded in this concept that the IP was indefensible, that it was not something that they could, like lock down and copyright, because it is derivative. It is, based on mythology. It's based on other fantasy worlds and mythologies. And so, they went to this AOS. They went to AOS in large part because they could, start from scratch and try and make things that were very uniquely Games Workshop, much more copyrightable, much more defensible. However, what you just said were two different things. Like, so both Creative Assembly and Cubicle 7 pay to license the Warhammer Fantasy universe. So clearly it's an IP that is defensible, is something that is unique enough to be licensed. If it wasn't, you couldn't license it. They could just use it freely. So I think it's interesting that through the passion of the licensees, I think and again, this is speculation, and one day maybe one day when some of these guys move on or retire, old Jordan Sorcery can get a teary interview, and we can find out what the genesis of Old World actually was and all the fun stuff that happened along the way. But it does feel like to me that it's actually the licensees feeding back into Games Workshop, asking questions about what is essentially something that Games Workshop threw in the dumpster, and then people at Games Workshop having to go rifle through the trash to go find and answer these questions or make them up, is probably what gives us the Old World, which is really cool.
Yeah, I super agree. Do you want to take us for what Rob said?
Sure. Rob, Old World brand manager and guardian of the assets. All right, Rob.
Yeah.
Not just other Rob anymore.
It's the same guy.
It's the same guy? All right. It wasn't just that we wanted to make Grand Cathay for the video game. We did know that it would all need to be designed for miniatures, because that's what Warhammer really is. Creative Assembly wanted as much as they could get, but they didn't need to think about how it looked on the tabletop. We made sure that we did.
Little side note, by the way. I once held a bunch of. There was a Black Library weekend in Nottingham, but they were live streaming it. So a bunch of the authors needed to hire a place, so they hired the TSN Arena. They hired downstairs. I set up a big TV for them so they could watch the live stream and they could all get drinks, eat food, play some games together. Nice. And then I set them up. And then really fun story. One of them immediately came back up, was like, "We've broken it." And I'm like, "That's not a surprise. You're authors." So I came back downstairs and I plugged it in, and I was like, "It's working." And it turned on just at a point when, during that Black Library kind of presentation, one of the presenters, very nonchalantly said, "And the best thing about Black Library is the miniatures that you can get." Like, that's what he said out loud. And I was in a room full of Black Library authors as they all went, "Boo!"
Also,
and I just left. I was like, this is not my space. I should not be here.
Also, a whole range of things that like only recently, I guess Horus Heresy is functionally a tie-in game to Black Library content. But only recently have you seen, in like just general 40K and AOS, tie-in miniatures released routinely that go along with the books. So yeah. Anyway,
Games Workshop. It's normally a book about a miniature that already exists, right?
Exactly right. Yeah, it's kind of the other way around. Yeah. All right, what does old Mark say?
Some of our initial concepts were limited by the realities of wireframes. They can't show long flowing robes, for instance, as that is a lot more expensive to animate. But we wanted those aspects for our models. We worked with them, but we knew that we'd be able to make miniature that would be definitive. So it's interesting. Interesting because they said that GW did a bunch of the designs, but then they've obviously cross-referenced that with Creative Assembly and said, does this work for animations? And then they've said, not really, it's expensive. And then they've gone, tough. It's just tough. More capes. That's all we'll have. Anyway. Keep going. Luke, he's new.
Oh, Luke, concept artist and gnomic presence. I assume he's small in stature. I'm surprised we haven't met someone whose nickname is Waxy yet. Anything that went below the knees was forbidden, said Luke. And then JTY, who's all about below the knees. We certainly want to be respectful of what's in the game. We made it all for them to use after all. But we are now making miniatures based on the original work we did. We're not going to reinvent it, but we can certainly do it exactly how we want it in plastic.
Oh, so they may be talking about the difference between the design decisions between what you might see in the games and what you might see on the miniatures themselves. That's fair. Absolutely. Also, like, they might have got the sign-off locally, but someone in production or even just a higher up is like, no, I would like you to have different shields or hats. And they incredibly late into the process, I assume. I imagine it's all done, all sculpted, all ready to go, and then someone's like, different hats.
Need more hats.
So...
But also beyond that, though, I mean, here we go. We're talking about two distinct mediums, right? Both will use, obviously a sculptor of some kind, but the sculptor for Creative Assembly is limited by the technology in the same ways that Games Workshop is limited by the technology in other ways. But they're different forms, and so you have to design to the medium that you're working with, and they're just, again, giving insight to that process and basically bigging up, I think, the idea that despite what you've seen on that Bush League Creative Assembly game, this is the real Cathay. This is the real deal right here. We got capes and hats.
Yeah. And if someone was able to go into the digital files of Total War 3 and create STLs from it and print them, they're not the same as ours. Okay, you scumbags.
And listen, Imanji is barely not in jail, so let's not encourage anyone to doing that.
Absolutely not doing that. Okay,
no, don't do that.
So Owen, Grand Cathay is inspired by Chinese mythology. It's just as Empire and Britannia have real-world influences from the Holy Roman Empire and medieval France and Arthurian legends, respectively. Grand Cathay takes inspiration from several of the great and most celebrated Chinese dynasties, but we've made our own, and everything has to tie in to Warhammer. I like the concept. I like that phrase that they use. We made it our own. We took their culture. What is that called? We took their culture, and then we
yes, it's called? Cultural. Yes, it's called cultural appropriation, Rob. However, as we talked about, and as we talked about, I've got my Bob Dole pen out. I think we've talked about this many times in the past that, like, I think there's a lot of concern around, like, oh, we could never do Araby, like, oh no, we can't do Araby, like that would be racist or whatever, or like even the idea that Kislev got canceled because of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. I think that is a sort of a myopic vision of what like, I don't know, being a conscious human being is all about. Yes, they may have made it their own, but yes, that is in the context of Warhammer. If you're taking the awesomeness, and by the way, it is awesome. The history of China is incredible, and every time I even dip my toe into some of it, it is just fascinating, and it's thousands of years, right? Like the Chinese.
I'm currently appreciating it through an anime called The Apothecary's Apprentice. Anyone out there watching it with me? Any fellow weebs?
That's an excellent way to get into it. Historical fiction is how I got into Japanese history through Shogun, James Clavell's Shogun. But the thing that's important is that there's respect for the subject material, that you are trying to put yourself and show empathy for the culture. It's not Orientalism, the other, that you are in, you are finding what are the, cool things about this people, about their mythology, about their history that you can pull into Warhammers. Yes, making it their own is literally someone picked up a thesaurus for cultural appropriation to try and word that differently. But yes, I mean, that is what you're going to do. The question is, how do you do it? Do you do it with respect? Do you do it with reverence for the source material? Do you do it with a complete, trying to get a holistic view, and they're obviously not going to nail it. I'm not Chinese. I can't tell how well that they've done this. And, there's probably no single Chinese person who would be an authority on what the proper way to represent China in Warhammer would be. But I think, I don't know.
I want more of that, right? Like
Yes.
as much as that's worded very funny, and you get the opportunity to say it. I want that. I want them to explore indigenous American cultures and Southern American cultures, Polynesian people, mainly because if it's done well with research and revenants, you get to bring forward to me stuff that I might not be aware of. Like I watched that really great armor video from earlier. I took a week of classes of Sikh martial arts, and I discovered so much about some cultural stuff by taking those martial arts classes, and I found out about like turbans and weapons in them and a bunch of other stuff, which was really fascinating, and exposing me to more of those through the medium of the thing that I like, which is wargaming, is super cool. So I'm really pro it, is my point. I wanted to express out, especially when it's done well. Like now I've watched that thing from that lady's armor video from earlier. I'm like, ugh, plate armor. No, not in our 14th century China fantasy. What is this? We know it should be scale armor or brigandine. And I'm cool with that.
I do wonder how much, actually, I don't know how I didn't put it together, but I wonder how much of this article was actually inspired by that video. Because
interesting.
Because it is cool. They do answer to, Kerplunk, maybe even Capachow, in the comments for the link to the video that we're referencing, because she does a really wonderful job. And again, giving insights to some of the designs and inspirations from this. And I can't wait to see your follow-up, hopefully, to this article. That would be cool.
Mm-hmm. Right, let's see what Rob's got to say.
Rob, importantly, this is a Warhammer take on China. Warhammer is a lot of things, but there are simple tropes that unite it. It's skulls, it's death, it's grimness. But for cultural reasons, many of these signifiers don't align with a Chinese-influenced design language. So we had to think about which other levers we could pull to make sure it was Warhammer.
That's fascinating, because I don't know if anyone's paid attention. I haven't really. But Apple announced their new design language that they've updated recently for all of their Apple products. And it's basically that some of their symbols on a phone are a little bit see-through. That's it. But they made it a presentation like they'd reinvented literally the sun. They're like, we've reinvented light and it's basically life, right? Yeah. And I love that there's a meeting for Warhammer design, and they're just all in there, and all the artists with their sketch pads, and they're like, I'm channeling skulls, I'm channeling grimness. Yeah.
Can we get more death?
Yeah, I want the Steve Jobs of Games Workshop to come out on stage, and we've updated the design language, we're keeping skulls, we're keeping grimness, we're adding OSL.
But I mean, while adding translucence to icons on Apple may seem minor, those sort of aesthetic choices really do inform the vibe of a brand, how you associate and think about it. There's a reason why when something gets rebranded or renamed or there's a new logo by some massive global corporation, it's tens of millions of dollars go into making that decision, and they often still screw it up. So it's this is a tight team trying to wrestle with what is Warhammerness, and if we just took China and made it Warhammery, is that going to represent Chinese culture, mythology, and history correctly in a Warhammer context? So that is, to me, that's a cool way to go about it. Again, I'm high-fiving a bunch of white guys in the UK for doing such a good job of being culturally sensitive. But to me, it is, it relieves me of one of my greatest fears, and also shows that they're demonstrating the ability to do this for other factions potentially, and also we're celebrating here. I'll be very curious to see what the reaction is to folks who are much closer to this culture, mythology, and history. Yeah.
I now want an actual like design, someone who's worked in design for like 30 years or whatever. I would like an hour-long kind of H-Bomb and Guy folding ideas breakdown video of the design of Warhammer. I want to know if there is actually a Warhammer-ness, that they could point to. And is it reductive? Is it it'd be fascinating. I don't know much, I don't know enough about design at all, but it'd be fascinating if someone did to watch that.
I think old Rob here, protector of the assets, nailed it. It's skulls, it's death, it's grimness. I think that's probably as succinct a mission statement as you can get from Warhammer.
Because one of the things that you and me really like, not to speak for you, but I think we quite like the almost 80s Tolkien-esque kind of sword in the stone fantasy that did exist in early Warhammer Fantasy Battle, right? We actually don't see that tons in the Cathay designs, apart from the people on the gondoliers. They're serving some whimsy, but is there not also an element of whimsy?
I don't know. You hear this, the pining for whimsy. Your rogue hobbies is showing a little bit here, Rob. The pining for whimsy is there for people, I think, and then maybe there's a lot of fantasy heads who really love what do they call it, the red era, the red era of Games Workshop, where it was a lot of popping colors and stuff. But with 6th edition Warhammer Fantasy Battles, it very much moves into its skulls, grimness, and death phase, where you have, I think, the foundational whimsical elements, and now you're throwing a sepia filter on top of it. And I think that's sort of, to me, the genesis of the tone of how Warhammer changes. So now you have these ridiculous things that are now being taken seriously. And that, I don't know, that almost to me is the magic of Warhammer. You have very ludicrous, clearly this wasn't made up, this wasn't conceptualized in all seriousness, but now you are, now the tone is serious, and it just does something really cool. And I think that's for all Warhammer to me.
Very interesting. Yeah, yeah. We should explore the concept of whimsy more in another video. Okay, let's see what let's see what Owen said.
Both Creative Assembly and a Chinese sensitivity team were very helpful, providing guidance documents to assure we understood China and didn't make the wrong move. There are various symbols to avoid, and referencing skulls or gruesome body horror as part of the Grand Cathay visual language were ones we were keen to avoid.
Mark said there are certain styles of clothing and hair which signify darker periods in Chinese history. We have to be respectful of those alongside other considerations. Then Owen said there are dynasties which truly celebrate in China. We made sure to utilize some of those aesthetics from eras that they spanned. There's a great deal of difference between Chinese, Japanese, and Korean aesthetics, which Westerners can often get wrong. Very true.
That's right. And also, if you nail those differences, that creates a lot of design space to perhaps in the future have factions designed around Japanese and Korean aesthetics that are distinct from Cathay, which is cool. If you just use Asian tropes to make your Cathay, which is easily what Grand Cathay could have looked like if it was released 30 years ago,
maybe even
you limit yourself
20 years ago.
Maybe even 10 years ago, to be honest with you. So I guess this is close to 10 years ago. But yeah, it reserves those areas by making them distinct and unique to themselves and true to themselves. You reserve those other opportunities for future development and design.
Absolutely, which I think is really exciting and something I'd like to see in the future.
Yeah. Luke says, we made sure to avoid an ill-informed Western perspective on the design criteria, which is very easy to do by accident.
This is quite a long article, and thus, I guess, also a long video about the concept of, respecting a culture, doing a homage to something versus doing something. Do you think this is odd? This is just generally odd as a tone from GW. They're not really necessarily talking about the products at all. We're not saying we did the shields this way because we did X, we did the army the other way because we did Y. I saw it pointed out that, using pole arms for a lot of the weapons is a good idea, because this part, at least, of the Cathayan army would have been generally facing against the northern warriors in the Chaos Wastes, because like, you know, and I don't know, we haven't got through the whole article yet, but they haven't mentioned that. It's quite long. It's interesting where this may or may not have come from, like as a decision to write, because this is odd. This is way more about this subject than I thought it would be, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. I guess some of it, I mean, it might indicate perhaps some concern around how people might react to, again, that very real scenario of the fact that this is being culturally appropriated. I'm not sure that I don't know. I have no idea what the actual cultural or ethnic, composition of the design team at Games Workshop or Creative Assembly was, and whether or not it included anyone who would actually have, a Chinese perspective present in the room. So at the very least, guys, and again, this is not a perfect process. At the very least, there is an effort to engage and to engage with the source material, aka entire people's history and culture, and to do it with some respect. And I think what they're trying to do here is, in the event, maybe this is a little cup. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe they're just showing off because they're proud of their process, and that they're trying to demonstrate that this is how we tried to do this, quote, the right way, and this is how we arrived at our decisions. Which, again, very on Games Workshop. This level of transparency, and maybe it's because they're proud of the effort that they put into it and the teams that they work with to achieve it. That'd be nice. Wouldn't that be nice?
That'd be nice.
Yeah.
Do you want to take us through the next person?
Holly, concept artist and grandmaster semiotician.
Also daughter of Jez Goodwin.
What is a semiotician?
Semiotician. Great question. Not sure. Let us know in the comments.
Let us know in the comments. You may notice similar approaches in some Japanese media to Western medieval aesthetics, which can also come off as inauthentic. This kind of media isn't bad. It can be a cool way of pushing into new areas of creativity, but it's definitely not historically accurate. That feels like Holly's speaking directly to the criticism of some of the Cathayan designs.
Holly's a second generation legend. Jez Goodwin's daughter.
I know.
She's worked in design and at GW since she was basically old enough to get a job. Does most of, if not, she has done the follow-up work on the Old World map. So like has done most of what you'll see in the modern Old World map, and she does a lot of like the iconography for like things like Space Marine chapter symbols, like transfer sheets, and a bunch of that stuff. So like she's a heavy researcher and design kind of like savant. So it's actually super exciting to see like that she gets a voice and to talk about this.
And as a concept artist, I think she was super involved in the maps, wasn't she?
Yes.
Like the actual design of the new Old World. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, for sure. JTY, China is very proud of its heritage and we're happy to oblige. Owen, I think the Longma is a great example of what we're trying to do. We originally wanted to make a quiln, a sort of Chinese unicorn that flies without wings. They're noble, authentically Chinese beasts, but without wings, they don't translate as well as a miniature. We were trying to find a version of a Pegasus for a centerpiece hero miniature, perhaps monstrous cavalry. This is interesting because I saw this talked about in that lady's video. And she was saying that yes, this is clearly a quiln, but they've just added wings and some, fin elements. And she's like, "That's fine. It looks great. And I don't care." Yeah. Which is good. Like riff off the concept, right? That's cool.
Yeah, but here they're actually answering that. They're actually talking to that.
I think this is a response to that video. I think I'm with you. I think this is a response to the video.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Okay, so Owen said.
You can't just put wings onto a kiln. Sorry, literally a response. You can't just put wings onto a kiln. So in the end, we put in the work to create our own. Longma literally means dragon horse. It's which was pointed out in our comments before as well. It still has plenty of Chinese-inspired elements, but it's now entirely a beast of our setting. So again, how do you appropriate how do you take those elements of Chinese mythology and mash it up for Warhammer? There's an insight to their process, which was cool. It wasn't just we need a Pegasus that looks like a let's make something that looks like, you know, this thing on this takeout container, but put wings on it. It was, you know, a detailed work. And the thing that's awesome about this, regardless about how, you know, being respectful of culture and traditions, all this, we're getting insight to the creatives in this particular studio and the amount of effort and thought that they put into their design.
Yeah,
that is awesome. So like we're seeing their creative process. These people are actually professional and actually care about you know, whether or not anyone notices. By the way, lots of people noticed you know, the Longma and the fact that it was sort of a unique creature to the to Warhammer. But here's all the work we did or here's the insight to the work we did to arrive at these conclusions. Well, they should do this so much more. Because man, like there's so many people working so hard and doing great work, and it's great that they have this opportunity to talk about it.
You used to be able to just go to an open day and talk to them about it until Games Workshop literally shut that down. And not because, before anyone in the comments says, because of safety concerns. That's not true. They did it because they don't want the creatives to be able to build up enough of a profile to go get a better job.
SDS seems to not give a fuck, which is great. Keep doing that, SDS.
Yeah, keep going. Well, it's because it's basically where all the old creatives went. I think, or like they moved to. Hovering, JTY says, a hovering horse looks great in still image, but it doesn't translate well to the tabletop. We always try to understand the cultures we use for inspiration, their weapons, their armor, their wars, the things that inspire us without being directly copied. Taking that as grounding for Cathay has allowed us to do that in such a way that appropriate and respectful. Holly, you have to take design decisions because they look right, but when you are deeply into a project, you can uncover a whole new layer of meaning in your work, which is kind of what you just said, right? Like putting that work and homework in implies more in what's said, which I think is great. Do you want to say what Owen said?
Sure. The mountain armor is another example. It's a strange type of linked armor that may or may not actually have existed. This is totally a response to that video. It appears on sculptures and in the pictures of mythical Chinese heroes, but no one has been able to replicate it correctly in the modern era. It seemed absolutely appropriate for our heroes and the terracotta sentinels. It's China's own version of fantasy armor, and it has all the connotations we wanted. That's really cool.
Yeah, I think it's a response to the video, and it's please everyone in China start playing Warhammer. I think it's also that, like desperately, please. But we began our research in military history books. China has a very long history, and their arms and armor changed over the course of thousands of years. But there are certain classic looks associated with popular dynasties, such as Tang Dynasty, which is one of the main influences for the Jade Warriors. We took a lot of time to research differences between Chinese, Japanese, and Korean styles. You've got to look at these things to learn what not to draw as much what to draw. Where we then had to really be really clear on how ancient Chinese armor actually works, so we could remake it as something suitably fantastical. And then Owen says,
I can only see the lanterns right now. There we go. Owen, you need to know the rules before you can break them. In those places, with the Longma as a prime example, you have to know what not to do. We knew how the historical suits of armor looked, but they needed that Warhammer spin.
Ooh, Warhammerness. You also keep in mind that we're making a miniature. You need to know that sculpture is going to be able to show you the designs when they are reduced to a Warhammer miniature. JTY also said you also have to be able to make it in plastic. Some of the decisions we made deviate from the historical template we're taken due to the way you have to lay sprues out. Which now the Warhammerness in sprue design is as badly as possible, I think.
I think, yeah. Oh man, that's a whole other thing.
That's a whole other thing.
I'm not well spoken enough to it, but like when you open up some of the old kits, so like and you see the sprues that were essentially laid out by hand, right? So like before the days of you know, CAD design, computer designed plastics, they'd be, you know, green sculpted, and then they needed to be arrayed on a sprue. Like when you open it, there's like 6 guys on like an entire frame that takes up an entire box. And so like the way they slice down and assemble, like make their models now does allow them to pack a lot more shit into like one sprue. So there, I mean, there's an upside to it, but it also means that like a torso is often comprised of like 4 different tiny parts that only fit together one way. So, you know, it's there's pluses and minuses to it, of course.
For sure.
Mark, I'm very proud of the Sentinels. I imagine them coming alive with magical fire when they are awakened for war, with light pouring from their armor. I got the idea for those from an animatronic figure that scared the life out of me as a little kid. I imagine them as standing inert all across the land, waiting to be activated in times of war. Some might be covered in vines with offerings at their feet, but others are just part of the landscape. Oh man, that's sick, Mark.
Yeah, cool, Mark. Yeah, it's a great design. This one is the one that like I'm least interested in. I think of all of the kits that got released, I think the lantern is just woo. But yeah, this one. But I know this has got a lot of people. A lot of people are very hot on this. The big statue.
Yeah, the I was gonna say with the lanterns, you should probably just buy like a bunch of them to just have in the TSN arena, because no one who plays Cathay will be able to travel with them, because they're going to be like 1.5 feet long and immediately break if you put them in a case. So you should just have loaner lanterns available at all times at the TSN arena. You can just like rent them for the day
instead of having to do them themselves. Yeah.
Yeah. Instead of having to transport them, you just rent your lanterns.
Owen says, rules-wise, even though we've already begun work on Warhammer the Old World by the point it was needed, we did a lot of work on them using the rules from the 8th edition Warhammer Fantasy Battles, include a full set of unit profiles. This was to give Creative Assembly the context they needed to fit Grand Cathay into Total War, which is based off that edition of the game. It was in part mechanically contextualized a new faction. The entire Total War series is based on that edition of the game. So let's reinforce that, just so you know. So if a Cathayan unit had a movement of 6 inches, Creative Assembly could understand how fast it moved relative to everyone else. So this obviously ties in with what we've discussed before, that there's a Kislev book that was made, there was a Cathay book that's made, there may have even been other books that were made that we aren't privy to that were made, and I think maybe they even just talked about it in the community article previously.
This would imply that every time you see a new unit or something that wasn't present in 8th edition fantasy, in Total War, that maybe they actually did go back and create rules and a unit card for it, specifically for that era, or maybe they just did it for Cathay because they were, completely unique, completely new. Yeah, it's cool that they did that. I remember reading that when they did the announcement for Cathay for Total War, and that got me very excited that Old World was going to be kind of an 8th edition port, which it did not become.
It did not become. Yeah, a very interesting article with.
Was there not one more paragraph? I think we did have one more.
Sorry. There wasn't.
Sometimes they have a little throwaway nugget at the end.
Yeah, and with that, we end our first foray into the armies of Grand Cathay. Old World Almanac will return later in the week to examine a little of the in-world lore and the Kingdom of the Dragon. So we're going to get to do another little chat about this stuff as well. And if you are watching this and have watched this, these kind of more not super game-centric and more free-form conversations about something we're both, and also hopefully all of you, are very passionate about, is how we first started doing Square-based. It's an important part, because one of the things that I do like about Warhammer Fantasy Battle, and I've said, is the reason it's popular and the reason it will continue to be popular, because it's identifiably and recognizably a fantasy historical game. You have, when I first walked into Warhammer World all those years ago, and I walked in and I saw a ranked up unit of Chaos Warriors and I saw a ranked up unit of Empire, I immediately understood. I was like, those are dudes, they're a little Germanic, those are evil dudes.
They look like spiky Vikings.
Yeah, yep. I get it. And the design cues, like, while, very heavily just lifting, taking cultural but also just like general ideas and repackaging them for like corporate profit is whatever it is. That's just life. Like, there's nothing we could do about that. Shouldn't do. Oh, who cares? Like, my point is, it's identifiably understandable, and I like that about Old World. I like that about Warhammer Fantasy Battle. And it's something I'll continue with that twist, though, that, I guess, Warhammerness. The lizard men are a good example. Like, I completely understood culturally what they were referencing. I understood the lizards. It all made sense. But the toad, everything else was its own unique spin. And I think that's what makes it so. Yeah. That's what makes it so good.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's so good. So I love seeing this. I think it's great.
Yeah, and I think something to speak to of I think there is a far grosser version of this that is just like a money grab or whatever, or like it is entirely corporately driven, And this is what I mean by like it'll be interesting to see how Cathay feels as far as like once we have the army on the table, once we've seen the lore, the art that they're going to have to have drawn and made and created to sort of again do all of that war that world building. Is Cathay going to be very bland? Is it going to be very safe? There's lots of we have a live chat, and I saw some comments. Like is it going to be written in a way that's afraid of not just Western backlash towards cultural appropriation and stuff like that, but are they playing it safe so as not to offend the CCP? Like are they playing it safe because you have to, you don't want to upset the Chinese authorities? Will it be very vanilla in an effort like that? But another element that I would say in response to that would be, a lot of times I feel like when new factions are getting on their feet, they do start kind of boring. I think a good example of that would be Necrons in Warhammer 40K. Like the first swing at Necrons, where they were just sort of they were literally like James Cameron's Terminators.
Yeah.
And they didn't have a lot of depth. They didn't have a lot of interest. And it took time for them to evolve. It took time for writers who were inspired by the opportunity there. And so like Necrons even 5 years later were very, very different in feel and function. And now it's a very fleshed out faction within Warhammer 40K. And and really, I think just about every faction in Warhammer Fantasy and the Old World kind of does have a very bland root. So hopefully they lay enough foundation that even if it does come across as kind of vanilla in the first iteration, as more authors get their teeth into it, to add that depth and intrigue and humanizing, really put themselves in the shoes of the faction. Now we're not talking about China, right? We're talking about Cathay. It is a different thing. Then it is allowed to sort of stretch its legs and become more Warhammery as time goes on. So I really do look forward to the evolution, and especially what Black Library and the Cubicle 7 writers will do with it as a setting now that it is established.
I think it's also interesting. I don't know about you, but halfway through the video, I was thinking about like the audience backlash. Like even us just having this conversation, having discussed an article discussing how they wanted to be culturally aware of China when making something, we're going to get
two white guys patting other white guys on the back for being culturally sensitive.
Not even that. What I'm talking about is halfway through the discussion around those elements, like China's evolution over the past 30 years, as an example, like will inevitably bring us people to turn off, unsubscribe, and people to leave nasty comments, as we've seen many times, right? You said the lightest half sentence once in one of our videos, and someone lost their shit in the YouTube comments, and it was really fascinating. But what
I wasn't convinced they weren't a bot, by the way, but yes.
Okay, but
I know what you're saying.
Yeah, but what I like about maybe Warhammer Fantasy Battles, especially Old World, especially with how it was initially marketed, like this is actually a crazy, not like 180. But it is definitely like a seismic shift maybe in the landscape, in that Old World marketed, it's for grognards, it's for old people, it's like the old models, and I think a lot of what I see online is people being like, oh, is that old person game? But actually, there's a lot of really good storytelling that can be used, which Warhammer has traditionally done. A lot of good storytelling that can be told in this space as well. That is a little bit revolutionary. That is a little bit, county culture, or maybe using culture to address conversations around culture, which I think is really interesting. And you would probably be ignorant to want to avoid it.
It's so spicy. It's so spicy. There's so much. That you can not only just internal to China, but like China as it's engaged with Western expansion. I mean, the British literally started a war with China to force them to buy their heroin. So there's some awful dark shit out there that can be, that's why it doesn't have to be vanilla. There's all kinds of cool things that can be done by taking that historical context and then using it as inspiration. And maybe it doesn't have to be horrible things, but like, you know, there's just so much in the tapestry of history and mythology that you can use in a game like this. That again could either be a bridge to I'd like to learn more about a given culture, or I'd like to learn more about a period in history. Or it could be just a bridge to personal creative expression. I think this is cool. This looks awesome. It's a friggin' shape-shifting dragon. That could be it could just be surface level, and that's how you enjoy it. So that's what's great about these games and these worlds, is that they just are a an entry point into having fun with all sorts of different concepts and ideas and creativity. And it's really awesome to see an article like this that highlights the effort and skill that goes into the design and foundations of a faction as they're getting it off the ground. I would love to see, when they do the FAQ errata in the near future, a similar article that is nearly as candid about their design process for the old world and for what they're doing with the game. Because it was something that they used to be so much more transparent about. I have a 6th edition compendium from 2002, and the first 5 pages are Gab Thorpe, I think, just talking about what they were trying to do with the character rules and why they wrote them that way. Like that intent, that design, the design intent. That's what we're talking about here. We're talking about design intent. What were the designers trying to do, and how did they get to the vision they eventually do create, and what was that process? I would love to hear that from the writers and games designers, because maybe it would give us insight and also provide them the opportunity to hear, like, okay, if that's what you're going for, here's some criticism on maybe how you missed that mark or what have you. And I'm sure they're going to get that from this. We see what you were going for, but here's how you missed the mark or nailed it, right? And that takes a bit of bravery to expose yourself like that, and I hope they do it more.
What I really respect about the bravery of the designers is that all those years ago, they decided to make the French haughty wankers, which was perfect. Well done, lads. That was great. I hope you've all enjoyed this video. Let us know in the comments below if you did or if you didn't, specifically so we can block you. And then thank you all for tuning in. Don't forget to check us out on Patreon, and also Road to 20,000. There'll be more videos coming very soon. Thanks very much for watching. Stay square-based. Shout out to Val. Loads of love. See you soon. Bye.